started like every other morning. A small town, a girl with her backpack, a school bus just down the street. But she never got on. No one saw her leave. No one saw her taken. And for years, no one saw her again. They called it a runaway. They called it teenage rebellion. But deep down, her mother knew something was wrong, because 15-year-old Lily Morgan didn't just vanish. She was erased. It was October 2nd. Autumn leaves falling across the roads in Nolan Creek, Texas. A quiet place with slow mornings and long silences. Lily had just started sophomore year. Straight A student. Shy. Kept to herself. The kind of girl who always followed the rules. At 7:45 a.m., she left for school. Her mother, Evelyn, watched her from the kitchen window. Same as always, but the school called that afternoon. Lily never arrived. At first, no one panicked. Maybe she took a different route, missed the bus, was hanging out with friends. But by nightfall, when no one had heard from her, when she didn't answer her phone, and her backpack was found near the edge of the woods, the panic began. The police launched a search. Volunteers combed the woods with flashlights and dogs. Helicopters scanned the tree line, canvassing, flyers, cold calls, and still nothing. No scream, no blood, no struggle. It was as if she'd been plucked out of reality. Her parents were devastated. Evelyn stopped sleeping. Lily's father, Mark, barely spoke. They kept her room exactly as it was. Bed made, lamp on, posters on the wall. And every night, Evelyn would sit by the window, waiting, hoping. But Lily's case wasn't the only one. Around the same time, in another part of Texas, a girl named Laura Smither had disappeared on a morning jog. A few months later, Kelly Cox, a college student, went missing during a campus errand. And in Oklahoma, Tiffany Johnston vanished from a car wash. Different names, different towns, but one terrifying pattern. Women were going missing, and someone was making sure they stayed that way. It would take years to connect the dots. The man behind it all, William Reese, was already in and out of prison. A master manipulator, predator hiding in plain sight. But in 2001, no one knew his name, and no one linked him to Lily, because Lily's case never had any leads. No witnesses, no DNA, no body. It faded into the cold files, unsolved, unspoken, until 12 years later, on a rainy night in 2013, a woman knocked on Evelyn Morgan's door. She was barefoot, soaked from head to toe, eyes wide and empty, and she said 6 words. "Hi, Mom. I'm home now." It was Lily. Same face, same voice, but Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Something felt wrong. The woman who stood in that doorway looked just like Lily at 15. Same small frame, same freckle under the eye, but Lily would have been 27. This woman still looked 15. The town erupted. The missing girl had returned 12 years later, but she hadn't aged a day. No signs of trauma, no scars, no memory of where she'd been. She didn't know what year it was, didn't recognize phones, didn't understand social media. And when doctors examined her, they found something even stranger. Lily's DNA matched perfectly, but her blood chemistry was off. Unusually low cortisol, unusual bone density, almost like she hadn't been gone for 12 years. She had been preserved. Word spread quickly. News vans camped outside the Morgans' home. Reporters wanted interviews. Doctors wanted samples. But Evelyn just wanted answers. So did Detective Aaron Briggs, who had worked the original case, and never stopped digging. He sat with Lily for hours. She remembered her birthday, her cat's name, her favorite teacher. But when he asked where she had been all these years, she just stared ahead and whispered, "The attic." But there was no attic in the house she disappeared from. And the house had been thoroughly searched. Twice. And yet, when police returned to the Morgans' old home, which had since been sold and renovated, they found something. Behind a false wall in the attic crawlspace, tucked behind insulation and dust, was a bundle of Lily's clothes. a faded school ID, and something else. Something the reports don't talk about publicly. A journal, written in a child's handwriting, but dated every year she was gone. And at the bottom of each page, the same phrase repeated again and again. Don't open the door. Don't let them in. Don't look at the light. Lily was back, but something had followed her. When a girl vanishes for 12 years and returns looking exactly the same, it's not a miracle. It's a mystery, and some mysteries don't want to be solved. The girl who returned to Nolan Creek, Texas, was biologically Lily Morgan. DNA confirmed it, but she had no memory of her disappearance. No story, no scars, no sense of missing time. What she did have was a journal. It was found in a sealed attic space of the family's former home, a space that wasn't supposed to exist. The journal spanned 12 years, dozens of pages, handwriting that matched Lily's from childhood. Only each entry ended the same. Don't open the door. Don't let them in. Don't look at the light. Detective Aaron Briggs, who had reopened the cold case, reviewed the journal. There were no dates, no events, just scribbled thoughts, drawings, symbols. Some pages were frantic, scratched like a child in fear. Others were hauntingly calm, as if written by someone who had accepted their fate. On page 37, she wrote, "They come at night. They whisper in my bones. I stay very still so they think I'm not here. And then, the light is always watching." But here's what disturbed Briggs the most. On several pages, beneath Lily's handwriting, were smudges of adult fingerprints, burned into the paper, like whoever touched them wasn't alive. The journal was sent to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. They couldn't explain it. No chemical residue, no human oil, no prints in the system. And the thermal scan, it showed residual heat coming from the paper, as if it had just been written. Meanwhile, back in Nolan Creek, Lily had been staying with her aunt. She wasn't speaking much. She slept during the day, stayed up all night, and every mirror in the house was covered. Evelyn visited often. She brought old photos, talked to Lily about childhood memories. Some Lily remembered, others she didn't. She didn't recognize her father's voice. She didn't know her best friend had moved away. And sometimes, Evelyn swore, she'd see Lily just standing in the hallway, motionless, whispering something to herself. By the third week, strange things began to happen. The lights in the house flickered at exactly 3:11 a.m. Every night, the dog refused to enter Lily's room. And her aunt? She started having dreams. Not just dreams, nightmares. She said they were always the same. A long hallway, a wooden door, and a soft voice whispering, "Don't open it." Back in town, Briggs began researching similar cases. Girls who vanished, came back, weren't quite right, and he found one. Ruth Wilson, England, 1995. She disappeared one morning just like Lily. No body, no suspects. But 2 years later, a girl matching Ruth's age and appearance was spotted in a rural town wearing the exact same clothes. When approached, she simply said, "Not yet," and vanished again. The photo from that sighting, it looked exactly like Lily. Same face, same eyes. But that was impossible. Ruth and Lily were never connected, never even lived in the same country. Unless this wasn't about a person, unless something was using them. One night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She returned to the house, Lily's childhood home. She walked into her daughter's room, and there, on the desk, was a fresh page from the journal. It read, "She remembers now, but it isn't her memory." Evelyn called Briggs. When he arrived, he brought thermal imaging gear. He scanned the attic, the basement, Lily's room. Nothing, until he pointed it at a closet. There, a faint silhouette, human, still, facing the wall. They opened the door. It was empty. Later that week, a neighbor reported something else. He had a trail cam in the woods behind the Morgan house. Caught movement. A figure, pale, thin, walking out of the woods and into the house. The timestamp? 3:11 a.m. Briggs reviewed the footage. Frame by frame, he paused on the face. Not Lily, not Evelyn, not anyone from town. It was someone who had been gone for years. A girl named Tiffany Johnston, missing since 1997. And she looked just as she did then. Lily had come back, but she wasn't alone. Lily Morgan had been gone for 12 years. She came back, but time hadn't touched her, and neither had the truth, because the truth was still hiding in the dark. Detective Aaron Briggs couldn't explain the footage. A girl, presumed dead, walking into the Morgan house at 3:11 a.m. A girl who hadn't aged. A girl who looked just like another missing name. Tiffany Johnston, Oklahoma, 1997. Abducted from a car wash. Her body found in a field. DNA linked to William Reese. But here she was, alive and frozen in time. Briggs dug deeper. He cross-referenced dozens of unsolved disappearances. Young girls, same age range, same facial structure, and he found a pattern. Victims connected to Reese. Victims connected to Texas, Oklahoma, and beyond. Victims who had been found, but whose case files still listed unexplained phenomena. Unnatural preservation, missing time, unidentifiable fluids near the remains. Some weren't found at all, and some, like Lily, came back. Lily began to speak again, only at night, only when the lights were off. She'd whisper to herself, scribble drawings no one understood, symbols in spirals, eyes inside triangles. One morning, Evelyn found her kneeling in the living room, staring at nothing. On the wall behind her, written in ash, "We are still in the attic." Briggs returned with a specialist, a forensic psychologist. She interviewed Lily for hours, asked her about the journal, about the dreams, about the light. Lily finally said, "The door opened. I didn't mean to look, but it looked back." The psychologist left shaken. Her report simply said, "This is not a case of trauma-induced memory loss. This is something else entirely." She recommended immediate isolation. But Lily disappeared the next day. Evelyn woke up to a cold breeze. All the windows were shut. All the lights were flickering. She called for Lily. No answer. Then she noticed her front door was open. Lily was gone. Again. The town searched, but there were no footprints. No broken locks. No calls. No sounds. Just silence. Until Evelyn found one last page from the journal, tucked beneath Lily's pillow. It read, "I told you not to open it." Meanwhile, a final lead broke in the original investigation. DNA found on one of Lily's childhood books, partial match to William Reese. Somehow, he had been there, even though he was locked away, even though he had no known connection to Nolan Creek. Briggs believed Reese didn't just abduct victims. He chose them, targeted them. For what? He couldn't say. But it wasn't just for murder, because something always came back different. Lily's return wasn't an accident. It was a door, a warning, and she was never alone. A month later, a young girl appeared outside a gas station in Kansas, barefoot, muddy, silent. She was identified as Kelly Cox, missing since 1997. She hadn't aged. She remembered her name, and she said only one thing: "Is the attic still closed?" At the same time, a boy in Oregon woke up screaming. He drew spirals on his wall. He spoke of light in the door. He said a girl had spoken to him in a dream. Her name was Lily. She said they were watching. Briggs resigned 6 months later. He filed a final note before leaving. It said, "Some disappearances are crimes. Some are accidents. But some are something else. We're not alone. And we've opened something we can't shut." Lily's case remains officially unsolved. Her journal sits in evidence storage, too contaminated for testing. The attic was sealed, then mysteriously burned down. There was no arson. No one had been inside for weeks. But the firefighters said something strange. They heard a voice from inside the flames, whispering, Close it. Lily disappeared once, then came back, then vanished again. Only this time, everyone else changed, too. Some doors should never be opened, and some stories should never be forgotten. If the story stayed with you, if you believe real mysteries matter as much as the headlines, subscribe to Dark Case Files. We tell the stories you've never heard. The ones too strange for the news, but too real to ignore. True crime, supernatural, human, faceless, fearless, and unforgettable. Thanks for watching.